Good morning. Please make your way in and find your seat. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Good morning. Please make your way in and find your seat. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Good morning. Please find your seat. Our program is about to begin. Please welcome Elizabeth Dole Foundation CEO Steve Schwab and Executive Director of Caregiver Support Programs, Department of Veterans Affairs, Dr. Colleen Richardson.
Welcome to the Elizabeth Dole Foundation and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs' 8th Annual National Convening on Military Caregiving. As you heard, my name is Steve Schwab, and I'm the CEO of the Dole Foundation. I'm so proud to be here today. Thank you to everyone for joining us here in Washington, and especially to the thousands of individuals, caregivers, veterans, their families, and partners who are watching us from all across the country. I especially want to thank the Elizabeth Dole Foundation 2022 and 2023 Caregiver Fellows and alumni who are here with us today. They've traveled from all across this great country to be part of today's proceedings and to share their stories. If you haven't had a chance to spend some time with these folks, and Colleen was talking to a lot of them this morning, please take a moment and get to know them today while they're here in DC. They've spent this entire week in training, in fellowship, meeting with their congressional and Senate representatives, and yesterday, they even had a chance to spend some time with our nation's First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. They are an incredibly impressive group of selfless Americans, and I want to stop right now, and even though the lights are dim, I'm going to ask them all to stand up and be recognized. In case you didn't see, that's Victoria sitting right in the front here, who's cheering up her arm. She's got boundless energy. We love you, Victoria.
Love you.
I also want to thank our generous partners without whom we would literally not be here. First, we're at a Hilton. We're here because Hilton has donated the space, the food, everything that you see has been brought to us by the generosity of Hilton. We couldn't do it without our friends at Hilton. You're so amazing. Let's hear it for Hilton. And to our, not just our incredible partner, really a great partner to everybody in this room, and I know they do a lot of work to support the VA as well, American Airlines. We made sure that all of our caregivers and some of their veterans and care recipients could be with us. They got here safely and right on time. I don't think we had one delay yesterday, or the few days ago, which is pretty amazing. Thank you, American. Let's hear it for American Airlines. So every year, this convening brings together advocates, experts, practitioners, leaders in Veterans Affairs and caregiving. Together, we take a hard look at the challenges facing America's veterans caregivers, and we commit ourselves to initiating and delivering solutions. Many of the caregiver reform support programs, resources that have been introduced over the last 8 years have been born out of this convening. So I'm so eager to see what advancements, discussions, and solutions we can produce over the course of the day. I'm so grateful to be joined by my co-host for the day, Dr. Colleen Richardson. As you heard, she's the Executive Director of the VA's Caregiver Support Program. And Dr. Richardson, I want to thank you for your committed leadership. Since day one, you've been accessible, you've prioritized high-quality care, she's listened to the community and messaged to us across the veteran service community and military service community. It's so great to be here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you to all of our caregivers for the opportunity to work with you and to partner with you. It's an honor to be with you today and every day. I'd like to give a special welcome to our VA staff in attendance today and tuning in via the live stream. I'm proud to share that we're also carrying the live stream on the Veteran News Network, so an extra special welcome and thank you to all the veterans, families, and friends who are tuning in from VA medical centers and clinics across the country. To the veteran caregivers joining us today, today is all about you. If you're watching from a medical center and are wondering what we mean by the term caregiver, well, if you brought your veteran to an appointment today or manage their medications at home or assist them with their daily activities, you are a caregiver. We recognize how valuable you are to veterans, and on many days, we know that you are their lifelines. That is why it's important that VA partners with multiple organizations to offer many ways in which we can support our caregivers and veterans. So thank you to Senator Dole and the Elizabeth Dole Foundation for being one of those partners. This convening is one way that we open up the dialogue and share thoughts and opinions on services available to you. And you guys know this, I want to hear from you, and so does everybody in the room today. To everyone watching the convening, please share your comments, questions, and ideas through the various chats so we can make sure that your input is heard.
Thanks, Colleen. To make the most of our time together, we have focused this convening around 3 pressing issues facing our caregivers: mental wellness, preparing for the transition from caregiver to survivor, and the impact of caregiving on children at home. We have heard directly from caregivers that these areas are among their most urgent concerns, and we've already begun identifying opportunities for making significant improvements in our collective support of this community. We will explore each topic in depth all throughout today. We couldn't be here today without the support of some amazing convening partners. Let's give a big round of applause to Wounded Warrior Project, Leidos, Phillips, and our great friends at Booz Allen Hamilton, who allowed us to actually hold this convening with their support. Where are all our friends, our sponsors? Can we ask you to stand up? I also want to recognize the person who has blazed this trail for all of us, certainly for the work that I've been privileged to do over the last 9 years of my service to this community, and that's our founder and our North Star, Senator Elizabeth Dole. Dave, I'm so sorry to do that before I introduce you. We have to give the same standing ovation for Dave. Before I introduce Dave, I want to encourage everyone tuning in at edfconvening.com to type your names and locations into the chat. We want to use this time so that you can engage one another, ask questions for those tuning in. As Dr. Richardson said, we really want to hear from you. Please also use the hashtag EDFVAConvening2023 when posting on your social media today, and make sure to tag EDF and the Department of Veterans Affairs. We want people to know what you're talking about. And finally, I want to give a huge thank you to today's presenting partner, TriWest Healthcare Alliance, and introduce my good friend, Dave McIntyre. In 1996, Dave co-founded TriWest and has led the corporation to ensure that veterans all across the country have access to high-quality health care when it is unable to provide directly by the VA. TriWest's sole purpose is to serve the healthcare needs, and I hear Dave say this over and over and over again. This is what Dave lives every day, to serve the healthcare needs of the nation's military and veteran communities. And this company is devoted to that mission every single day. So everyone, please join me in welcoming the President and CEO of TriWest Healthcare Alliance, Dave McIntyre.
Good morning. Steve, thank you for that warm introduction, and for all you and the entire Elizabeth Dole Foundation staff do in support of this critical effort. To my colleagues and teammates from the VA, thank you for leadership. Thanks for all you're doing to lean forward in the construction processes that we have ahead of us. A lot of progress has been made since 2014. And a lot is left to do, but the VA is in really good hands based on the work that you're all doing. Senator Dole, it's a great occasion to join you today and to participate in this convening, and thank you for being the soprano soloist that's leading our chorus and so effectively doing so. Thank you for acting on what you encountered and learned during your husband's lengthy stay at Walter Reed, and bringing your powerful voice and compelling leadership to the side of caregivers, of our nation's heroes, and the hidden helpers. You're helping us all to forge the design to effectively meet this generation's veterans and their families' needs, and we are going to rise to the occasion and continue to achieve the art of the possible. All of us associated with TriWest Healthcare Alliance, the nonprofits that own us, and the entire ecosystem that makes us who we are privileged to support VA and soon to be DoD once again, and seeing that care is available in the community to complement what the DoD and the VA are unable to deliver directly, in order to ensure that the entire spectrum of needs are met. And as we've all learned, it's not the providers in either of those systems or the providers in the community that are the sole ecosystem that makes up the care journey for this nation's generations of veterans. And so much has changed since 9/11. And personally, it's good to see that the systems that support those individuals and their families are flexing to create the design that needs to be in place for this generation. We understand that it takes a team to achieve success. None of us alone do this work. We all together as a team can achieve the ultimate design that needs to be in place to effectively support those who have served this country so faithfully and their family members. We're simply humbled to be a part of the chorus. You've assembled to focus on shaping the way ahead so that our nation's veterans, caregivers, and their families thrive as a result of receiving the services and support they need and deserve. I'd like to give a special welcome to the caregivers and family members in the audience today, both here in D.C. and online across the country, and congratulate the newest Dole Caregiver Fellows, which includes Susan Graham, who hails from our home state of Arizona. Your dedication day in and day out to those you support inspires us all to be better at what we do. Like others in the chorus, we are proud to stand alongside both the VA and the Elizabeth Dole Foundation in the Campaign for Inclusive Care, an effort designed to train VA providers on how to integrate veteran caregivers into the clinical care team. It is so important that that happens, and I applaud all that are working towards that end. I know everyone in DC and watching around the country respects the role that caregivers play in our nation's wounded heroes in meeting their needs, and that their needs and the things that they need to be successful are both heard and addressed. And like many, we have a special place in our heart for the hidden helpers. Someday, we may all be hidden helpers. We don't know. Because it's those people that have risen to the occasion for their loved one that's struggling and has a need, to make sure that those needs are met, or to make sure that the gaps are filled as they complete successfully their journey in addressing their needs. And we applaud the role that they're playing for the care for the loved one. They're their hero, and there are heroes as well. To the heroes, hidden heroes among us, your example inspires us and compels us to engage in the Elizabeth Dole Foundation's mission to enhance support services available to hidden helpers. We're looking forward to this afternoon's discussion on the latest key EDF initiative to help lift the voices of these military caregivers and ensure that all are heard and heed their unique set of challenges and needs. We've accomplished so much in the last decade. Some of us can remember where we were on 9/11. I remember. I was in a hotel in Phoenix, and the DoD counterparts to our company for that geographic region were supposed to meet us for a 2-day summit to map out the next stage of our journey. My life changed at that moment. The DoD's life changed at that moment. And I learned about 9/11 because my colleague from the DoD at the time that was supposed to come to that meeting with his team called me on the phone and said, I'm not going to be able to make it. I hadn't had the TV on because I was preparing for the day. And I said, are you sick? And he said, no, haven't you seen what's going on? And he had to stay back, and the entire team at DoD had to stay back. And we repurposed that event for 2 days and remapped our company and remapped what we needed to do in response to the DoD. It was a bit of a gift that was the day that it happened and that that's what we were going to do. Because the journey that we continued on at that point had to inflect and make it possible for the medical establishment there to support the warfighter to go to the front lines. And our job was to fill in behind them. And I spent time every 3 months going to launch school. And I did that to understand what the journey was going to be coming back to the U.S. and the kinds of needs that we needed to effectively be able to meet in response to those that were coming back. And that inflected and lasted for years. And then I had the opportunity with my team to come to the side of VA. 4 months before April 14, when the Phoenix VA crisis lit off. And again, an opportunity to pivot. And so the ability now to come back to the side of DoD and to serve the whole ecosystem and to pivot again is going to be a humbling, privileged responsibility on our side. And we're looking forward to it. We could not do what we're going to be doing effectively without the examples and understanding what the needs are of those of you that serve in support of your loved one. And the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is making it possible for all of us in the ecosystem that are here to support you and honor you, to make sure that we flex ourselves, to make sure that the design going forward is going to accomplish meeting the needs of this generation's veterans and beyond. So it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to be a part of this event. I'm simply one of the chorus, and I look forward to having my brain filled for the next stage of our journey. Over the next few hours, you will be hearing from policymakers, caregivers, advocates, and leaders about the new resources to support military and veteran families. Progress is being made. If we look back 10 years, we've come so far, but we're only halfway up that sheer cliff. The good thing is all the right people are talking to each other, and all the right people are taking the content that you bring to the table and acting on that. And it's all for one reason. It's to make sure that the systems are ready for today, ready for tomorrow, and going to stand strong in meeting the needs of the DoD and the VA. So there's much more to do. Each of us assembled in this chorus that's convening, whether we're attending in person or engaging online, can together forge a brighter and more impactful future for our heroes, their families, and our nation. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage 2023 Dole Caregiver Fellow, Sean Lopez.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Ah, love it. I'm proud to be here in our nation's capital representing my fellow veteran caregivers, particularly those who share an experience of caring for a parent and a loved one who was made sick from toxic exposure. At 28 years old, I had just completed my second master's degree and was a few months into my career as a geologist in Denver, Colorado. The trajectory of my life shifted in seconds when my father, a Navy veteran, had a stroke caused by a late-stage kidney cancer. This cancer was likely related to toxic exposure while serving at NAF at Sugi, Japan. I had to quit my job, moved halfway across the country to care for him full-time. I gave up everything my life used to look like. In this journey as a caregiver to a veteran with a major neurocognitive disorder, I've lost friends. I've lost my free time. I've put my dreams and career aspirations on hold. I've lost out on promotions, pay raises, and valuable years of experience, watching from the sidelines as my peers went on to find success. But ultimately, being a caregiver means so much more than the sacrifices I've made. Despite what I've lost, I've gained invaluable time with my father and memories that I will never forget. I've become experienced with the healthcare system and an expert on his medical diagnoses. I've found my voice as an advocate and have learned to speak up when the system is not meeting the community's needs. I've helped drive solutions in my community and provided whatever guidance I can to help support other caregivers in similar situations. For everything I've lost, I've gained something new. That's why today, I'm especially grateful to be here in DC with Elizabeth Dole Foundation, an organization that has given veteran caregivers like me an opportunity to advocate for ourselves at a higher level. And I thank the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs for being here as well as a partner in this mission. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Sharif Elnan-Hall. Dr. Elnan-Hall is a physician leader who served as president and CEO of University Hospital in Newark, New Jersey from 2019 through 2022. There, he led the hospital through the COVID-19 public health emergency and oversaw substantial improvements in care quality and patient safety. Prior to his time at University Hospital, Dr. Elnan-Hall served as New Jersey's 21st Health Commissioner, where he led initiatives to improve infant and maternal health, curb the opioid epidemic, and advance the electronic exchange of patient health information. Dr. Elnan-Hall also served as the VA's Assistant Deputy Undersecretary for Health for Quality, Safety, and Value, and as a White House Fellow in the VA. On July 21st, 2022, he was confirmed as VA's Undersecretary for Health. Please welcome Dr. Sharif Elnan-Hall.
Thank you so much, Sean. You and your colleagues in this room, every single caregiver in this room, every single Dole Fellow, you are an inspiration to all of us, and you are the reason we are here today. I want to first thank Senator Dole, without whom we certainly would not be here, without whom VA's Caregiver Support Program would not be here, and without whom the tens of thousands of caregivers across the United States caring for our heroes would have had to find another way. Thank you so much, Senator, for everything you've done. Steve, your team has been an incredible partner to us for years, long before I arrived, certainly. And in particular, I want to thank Dr. Colleen Richardson, who you saw on stage a few minutes ago, and the entire caregiver support team we have across the country. Every single network has an incredible group of dedicated people, many of whom are veterans themselves, many of whom have a veteran in their lives, for whom this mission is deeply personal, and without whom we could not have reached a milestone of over 50,000 veterans in our caregiver support programming that we serve out of VA. So thank you to the incredible VA employees who work so hard every day to help amazing people who are caring for our heroes. I want to start by doing some myth busting here. And the myth is one of the broken veteran and the broken caregiver. We know how much hardship comes with this job. We see it every day, and I've had the privilege of learning about it every day. The veteran who becomes disabled in conflict defending our freedom in a life-changing way and comes home, goes through rehabilitation for both visible and perhaps invisible wounds of war. That veteran is not broken. That veteran is stronger because they've gone through that experience. And the same goes for the amazing caregivers who assist that veteran through their experience after they come home. Caregivers are not broken. Caregivers are not frail. Although it may seem like it in the daily experience, and although that experience can be tough, you are incredibly strong people, and you are assets not only to your loved one for whom you are caring, but you are assets to the entire nation. And people in Congress heard from you this week, especially the Dole Fellows, to understand better and better what we have to do out of the VA, what this country has to do to step up and make sure that you're okay and that you can do the job, because that, as the president said, is the sacred obligation that we have as a nation. You embody that sacred obligation. You are an inspiration to me and everybody at the VA, And I want to make sure that that's not lost on anybody in this room. Thank you for everything you do every single day for your loved ones. It is truly an inspiration to me and to all of us. And so last month, apropos of that, the president released an executive order to make sure that we continue to strengthen the care economy behind not only our military families and veterans, but for folks doing that job for loved ones across the country. And VA and our mission was heavily featured in that. The president directed us to expand our veteran-directed care program, which provides veterans with a budget to hire personal care assistants, including from family members, to all VA medical centers by the end of fiscal year 24, 2 Octobers from now. The president also directed us to add 75 new interdisciplinary teams to our home-based primary care program to serve an additional 5,600 veterans in their homes. And the president directed us to pilot a new self-directed care program that provides veterans with a budget for personal care assistance while reducing administrative burdens related to managing care. And finally, the president directed us to look forward with our program for comprehensive assistance for family caregivers and expand the aperture of folks who might qualify into the future to make sure that we do not leave the veterans and caregivers who need that program most behind. Our team is already hard at work developing plans to implement the president's order, and I have one message for all of you today. We will get it done. Most importantly, as we saw in our work together during the pandemic, we really aim to improve the lives of veterans, their families, and caregivers alike. An amazing example surfaced from that experience. A 13-year-old taking care of her mom, a veteran with PTSD, and her 3 younger siblings who applied for respite care in 2021 so that she could have time to focus on her homework. Or the veteran who said that the thing he appreciated most was the way this program allowed him to offer his home care provider a fair wage, so he didn't feel ashamed about needing help. The veteran who said his wife could take time for herself to go to her own medical appointments, and that meant a lot to him because he hates feeling like a burden. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this year across all of our caregiver programming is the Year of the Caregiver. We are supporting our caregivers as much as we possibly can through respite care to give folks the needed break that they must take so that they can be the whole person that they need to be for the person they're caring for. Or the fact that we are expanding a telemental health program so that the caregivers who need it the most can have access to that fortifying and potentially life-saving care that we provide every single day to veterans in our system. We have more mental health providers, I boast about this all the time, than any other healthcare system in the country. And we have the best mental health care providers in the country. The veterans we care for deserve that, and so do the caregivers looking after them every single day. And so by the end of this fiscal year, we will have that telemental health program available to any veteran and caregiver across the country who need it. Of course, this isn't the only thing that the president is focused on. He also expanded benefits in a historic way to veterans exposed to toxins during their service through a landmark legislation passed last summer called the PACT Act. The PACT Act adds hundreds of conditions that are now considered presumptive for exposure to burn pits in the post-9/11 conflicts, and also adds areas of deployment in the Vietnam War and other exposures that will be considered presumptive for key conditions like radiation, Agent Orange, Camp Lejeune contaminated water, and more. What this does is it opens the VA's doors even more to getting more veterans benefits and care. And what that means is that the caregivers who look after them every day will also benefit. Sean's inspirational story is just one example of that. He led off by telling us that it was an exposure that potentially caused his father's cancer and everything that came after that. The advocates who've been calling for this for years finally met their moment last year, and now it's on us at VA to implement it to its fullest extent. And so on that front, I will also promise you this. For any veteran exposed to these toxins and developed a condition related to them, we will get it done for you as well. The one thing I'll ask, because so many in this room have an incredible sphere of influence. You demonstrated this week with members of Congress. You demonstrate it every day through the amazing work that you do. Tell your colleagues, your friends, your loved ones, your networks about the PACT Act. Tell them that the VA's doors are wider than ever before, and tell them that we are here if they think they've been exposed to a toxin during their service, that we're here for them. The best way to get this word out is through amazing and influential people like you. I can scream from the rooftops all day, I can testify in Congress. That does not hold a candle to what you can do for people looking to you and ask whether they should trust the VA. I work every day to make that trust better and better, but that trust only goes up when we demonstrate progress, when we do the work, and we convince you that you should be telling your networks to try the VA. So that's my humble request for all of you today, a collective call to action for all of us, and thank you again to the amazing veterans and caregivers in the room today. We work for you, and I work for you. Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the stage 2014 Dole Caregiver Fellow, Shannon Fetuzzi Tumaleali Iafano.
Talofa and welcome. My name is Shannon Tui Maliali Ifano. I'm an Army veteran and a full-time caregiver to my husband, Sua, who became quadriplegic after suffering a spinal cord injury during a firefight in Afghanistan. I am honored to introduce our next speaker, who is a hero to many of us in this room and across the country, Senator Elizabeth Dole. Senator Dole has dedicated her life to improving the lives of others. She has served as Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Labor, President of the American Red Cross, and Senator for North Carolina. The groundbreaking initiatives she led on roadway safety, opportunity in the workforce, and the distribution of 1/2 of the nation's blood supply, just to name a few, continue to make our nation safer and more prosperous. Senator Dole has earned a reputation for creating transformational change. And 9 years ago, I witnessed that change firsthand as I sat on stage at the White House and watched the senator introduce military and veteran caregivers to the world. That day changed my life forever. Thank you for giving a voice to so many others like me who were lost, who were frustrated, who were losing all hope. Everyone, please welcome my personal hero and dear friend, Senator Elizabeth Dole.
Bless you. Thank you for those beautiful words. Oh, my goodness. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. Shannon, thank you so much for those beautiful words. And good morning, everyone. Dr. Elkahol, thank you for your excellent remarks this morning. We're grateful to you, to Secretary McDonough, and the entire VA leadership team for making caregivers and their families a top priority. We also owe a big thank you to Dave McIntyre and the Tri-West team. You are such a trusted connection between those who serve and their healthcare providers, and I have great admiration and respect for you, and what a fabulous speech, Dave. When we gathered at this event last year, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation was marking its 10th anniversary. As we look back on our first decade, We realized just how much progress we were fortunate to celebrate. All told, the impact of those 10 years was simply remarkable. Yet, after all the benchmarks and milestones were tallied, we ended our year with one resolute conclusion: our mission is far from complete. Caregivers remain an unpaid workforce. They're still standing on the front lines of veteran depression, substance abuse, and suicide, and they continue to be the people our veterans trust the most in managing their care. Their role will not diminish with time. In fact, it will grow. That's why I applaud the VA for making the historic decision to officially add caregivers to the department's motto. Undeniably, caregivers are an extension of the sacrifices first asked of their veterans. My beloved husband Bob once said of our nation's service members, "War summons the greatest qualities of which human beings are capable: courage beyond measure, loyalty beyond words, sacrifice and ingenuity and endurance beyond imagining." I've witnessed similar qualities among the hidden heroes who commit years, often decades of their lives to caring for those service members when they return home. In them, I've seen eternal devotion, everlasting patience, an undaunted voice for their veterans, and a ceaseless spirit of awe-inspiring selflessness, humility, and love. If we consider all that our military and veterans communities have contributed to our nation, it should remind us that when President Lincoln said that we would care for those who have borne the battle, he was not setting an ambitious goal for us to strive toward. No, he was making an ironclad promise that America must never fail to uphold. For our caregivers, however, America has yet to live up to those promissory words. But with all of us willing to do our part, I know we can and we will. As we enter the second decade of our work, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation will continue to lead that charge. Currently, we're championing bipartisan legislation called the Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act, introduced by Senators Jerry Moran, John Tester, and Maggie Hassan. Now, I'm a little embarrassed, but truly honored that it bears my name. And I'm extremely grateful for what this legislation will deliver. Veteran home and community-based care that's more affordable, more convenient, and more ready to serve the growing numbers who will count on it. Our foundation also continues to deliver direct services to caregivers. The Respite Relief Program, established with the generous support of CareLinks by Share Care and Wounded Warrior Project, has now delivered more than $1.6 million in at-home care services. That's more than 63,000 hours of professional support, giving burned-out caregivers more moments of rest and relaxation. Our Hope Fund for Critical Financial Assistance, launched with the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation, also makes an incredible impact. In our first year alone, we have already paid more than $600,000 in emergency relief payments to caregivers. Now, over the course of the convening, you're going to hear more about our recent work, including our partnership with TAPS and the American Red Cross, focused on the solemn transition from caregiver to survivor. We'll also update you on the progress of our Hidden Helpers Coalition, which now includes 80 organizations. It's another initiative that's grown by leaps and bounds. But before we move ahead with the agenda, I'd like to reflect on an important truth that I hope we all keep in our hearts and minds throughout the course of our work. Behind every statistic we share today, behind the 5.5 million caregivers and the 2.3 million hidden helpers, there are real people filled with love and vulnerable to pain, with tightly held dreams and hopes for their future. One of those people is Ashley Lee of Florida, who cares for her father, Daryl, a Vietnam veteran with ALS. In the face of all she manages, Ashley carries herself with strength and poise. 14 years into this journey, she handles her father's care with confidence. She has 3 cameras in his bedroom so she can keep an eye on him at all times. She has an established routine of bathing him, feeding him, administering medications, and performing breathing treatments. Even in the later stages of his disease, she's taken him on trips, arranging hospital beds and lifts at every destination. However, the toll of caregiving it's very difficult, it's undeniable. The more fragile her father becomes, the more Ashley monitors his vital signs on a near constant basis. Her daughter has been a big help, though Ashley doesn't like seeing the effect it's had on her life. But there's no one else to lean on. After 14 years, she says the offers of help have all dried up. Ashley has relied on therapy to keep herself going. In fact, it's been so beneficial that she's pursuing a graduate degree in psychology. I'm proud, yes. I'm proud to say that Ashley is one of our foundation's newest Dole Caregiver Fellows. And I'm going to ask again for all of our past and present fellows who are here today to stand and let us recognize you once again. Please stand. Yes. Thank you, thank you. Love you. Friends, these outstanding caregivers represent millions more. Together, they inspired the movement our foundation has led over the last 10 years, and they are the reason why we will continue to carry this movement ever forward. So let's get moving. Let's show the caregivers in this room and throughout the nation that we came here with purpose, that we came here to create positive change, and that we came to get things done. Mark Twain once said, "Thunder is good. Thunder is impressive, but it's the lightning that does the work." On behalf, yes. On behalf of America's hidden heroes and their children, let's light up the skies. As we continue the mission, I can't wait to see what we accomplish together. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage Elizabeth Dole Foundation CEO Steve Schwab and Executive Director of Caregiver Support Programs, Department of Veterans Affairs, Dr. Colleen Richardson.
So I just wanted to take a moment and foot stomp what Dr. Elna Hall said a few minutes ago. You know, I've spent the last 20 years around active duty military when I was on active duty. And between that time and my time at the VA, I've met some pretty incredible veterans and military service members. But I've met some even more incredibly strong caregivers. And he mentioned that just a few minutes ago, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. I think that speaks volumes about the work, the sacrifice, and what y'all do for our veterans and our service members. So thank you. So I think it comes as no surprise that caregivers report higher levels of stress and depression than non-caregivers. And according to a past RAND military caregivers study, military caregivers show a greater strain on general decline in their physical health as well. I see lots of heads nodding. Many of you can relate to that. I'm not typically a big fan of delivering data, but I'm going to share a few things with you, and then I'll tell you why. According to the CDC, 14.5% of caregivers report experiencing 14 or more mentally unhealthy days in the past month. 36.5% of caregivers report getting insufficient sleep. That's what I thought. We know that caregivers are more likely to live with depression compared to non-caregivers. And per the ADAA, 40 to 70% of caregivers experience symptoms of depression. Some of our caregivers even use alcohol to cope. So why did I share these stats with you? And these are just a few. One, I want you to know that you're not alone. If you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, depressed, having trouble sleeping, feeling like no one understands, it's really, really important that you know that you are not alone in this caregiving journey. I hope many of you caregivers saw some of those hands go up next to you. You are not alone. I also realize that there is zero chance of positively impacting the lives of our caregivers and the data I just cited if I don't and we don't take proactive steps to make changes and provide you with the tools and resources you need to be successful. I want to share something with you that I've shared with my veterans and military family over the last 20 years as a clinical psychologist. You, me, we are all so much more than one slice of pie. We have many, many, many slices that make up who we are, that form our identity. You are more than just caregivers. You are sons, you are daughters, you are aunts, uncles, mothers, fathers. Some of you are basketball players. Some of you are musicians. Many of you have more than one slice of pie to your entire piece of pie. And we want to help you rediscover that in this caregiving journey. So how do we do that? First, and most importantly, I want to give you permission to seek out mental health help. Permission to seek out mental health help. To feel all the things that you feel, whatever and however that may be. As a clinical psychologist, I recognize the importance of mental health and well-being because I, too, have struggled with this. How could I not? How could you not? If you haven't heard yet, the Caregiver Support Program, with the help of your feedback received through the listening sessions, recently launched a new resource that I think will be extremely valuable to our caregivers and veterans. CSP, in collaboration with the Office of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention through our clinical resource hubs, is piloting a new program to provide mental health services to our PCAFC caregivers. As part of this program, most clinical resource hubs will hire 3 psychotherapists and 1 advanced medical support to offer mental health counseling to caregivers enrolled in PCAFC sites within your particular VISN. We're happy to announce that these services are being piloted in VISNs 2, 4, 8, 10, and 16, with 16's VA Fayetteville Healthcare System seeing their first caregiver on May 1st. And within the first week, we have 8 caregivers signed up for regular psychotherapy. We will continue to bolster this initiative by hiring a clinical director to assist with the program's expansion. We are slated to hire 54 mental health providers dedicated solely to our PCAFC caregivers. We hope to lead this full implementation and sustainment of these services nationwide. Respite care is another initiative at the Caregiver Support Program to help fight against mental health issues. Respite can also alleviate stress and burden felt by our caregivers. And while we've made some great progress in increasing the use of respite amongst our caregivers, it's still not enough. Respite is an underutilized resource to help our caregivers take a mental health break from their day-to-day caregiving duties. We want to continue to make respite the norm among caregivers, but we need to do a better job to offer this valuable resource to our caregivers. So my program office, has funded respite liaisons to assist by placing respite specialists throughout the country at every medical facility. We've already hired several of these specialists, and more are on the way. So more than just behavioral health hubs and respite, we want to normalize the use of behavioral and mental health services we have to offer. Listen carefully. It is okay to ask for help. It's okay to not be okay. Caregiving is stressful, so I want to encourage you to not only take advantage of respite and mental health services, but encourage you to use other resources that our program offers as well, such as Building Better Caregivers, the Annie text message program, caregiver health and well-being coaching. Last year, about 27% of our referrals from BBC came from our staff. This year, over 40% have come from our staff. So we're starting to see our caregivers seek out additional resources, and we see our staff making appropriate referrals to the programs to get you the resources that you need. I don't know if you all have heard about the caregiver health and well-being coaching. It's not what's the matter with you, but what matters to you. I love that philosophy about this program. I love it. Last year it was available at 18 sites. Today it's available at over 74 sites, and we hope to have it at 100% of the 171 medical facilities across the country by the end of this year. As I mentioned a moment ago, many of you gave us these ideas to support you as caregivers. I've recognized many of the faces in the room today simply because I've had the opportunity to connect with so many of you over the last 2 years through listening sessions that my team and I hold. I will continue to learn from my staff and learn from our caregivers firsthand. Most recently, a listening session that I held was in Topeka, Wichita, Phoenix, Arizona, and Puerto Rico. We anticipate more visits and listening sessions throughout the rest of the year, including site visits to visit with these staff. We anticipate doing 60 to 70 additional in-person and virtual site visits and listening sessions with caregivers and staff across the country. In addition, I had the pleasure of hosting a listening session with many of the caregivers here today that came in January to the Federal Advisory Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you and listen to you, as I know I was unable to attend because I was on one of those site visits in Kansas. And while we might find it impossible to be at all VA site visits in person, we are conducting virtual site visits while also gaining feedback through something called V-Signals surveys. We conduct these visits and share these surveys because we know and understand our caregivers. You have unique caregiving needs that most people don't or can't understand. So it's important that we listen to you and gain this feedback. I want to just talk for a few more minutes about some of the other initiatives. Again, these have come from you as caregivers. And I think it's important that you hear what we're doing because we listen. I listen to you. So more than behavioral health needs, there are other unmet needs currently being discussed. For example, CPR. That was something we heard a lot from our caregivers. We need to be CPR certified or trained. We also have some concerns about home safety. So I wanted to share that our Western New York CSP team in Buffalo went above and beyond in February to provide CPR training to caregivers in the Caregiver Support Program in the wake of the Damar Hamlin collapse. The incident gained much attention from our local programs and from caregivers across the country, so we listened.
In June of this year, we will partner with the Red Cross to create a training video, and once complete, we at CSP will share the video on our website. Hands-on training is already taking place locally, but doesn't yet offer CPR certification. So what are we doing about it? We have some of our local RNs training to become CPR certified. At this moment, we have 10 facilities interested in doing this training, and we're looking how to best support this. The plan is for in-person CPR training for our caregivers, thus getting you all CPR certified. Partnership is also in the works with the voluntary service. So we don't approach things, I don't approach things from one avenue, but 2 avenues and 3 avenues. My philosophy is 1 is none, 2 is 1, and 3 is preferred. So we got to tackle it from multiple avenues. So we're taking 3 approaches. We will continue to keep everyone posted on how this pilot goes and how things move forward from there. The last thing I wanted to talk about is that we know a lot of the veterans that you take care of are significantly disabled, and not all of you are trained to do some of the complicated things that they need. For example, sitting from the bed, moving into their wheelchairs, tub transfers, etc. So we are working on videos to demonstrate to our caregivers how to do these things. These videos will be available on our website as well. And as Dr. Elnahal mentioned, this year, Caregiver Support is focusing on our mission to promote your health and well-being through the year of the caregiver. Every year we pick a theme. Every year we pick a theme to work towards to make this program better and better. And this year was a year that is all about you as caregivers. We're looking to put, and I emphasize, bold, and highlight this, but the word support back in the Caregiver Support program. We're doing this by listening to our veterans and caregivers as a community, and doing this through these listening sessions. Last year's theme was all about getting to right. We're focused on leveraging PGCSS through its strengths and ability to support all caregivers of our veterans enrolled in VA. And our vision for the program of comprehensive assistance for family caregivers was wanting to be known as a robust clinical program. It's providing support that makes a difference in the lives of our caregivers and veterans through our caregiver support line. It's improving our communication with caregivers and veterans through the standardized letters that we now send out. Our steps forward with resources I mentioned earlier, like respite care, anti-text, building better caregivers, and caregiver health and well-being coaches have enabled us to say yes to many, many more caregivers. Getting to right laid the foundation for where we are in 2023, which is Year of the Caregiver. And now that we've challenged ourselves to find more ways to get to yes, to connect caregivers to life-changing resources, we've opened the door to empowering caregivers to taking advantage of these. In conclusion, I just want to thank you for allowing the time to share a small portion of what the Caregiver Support Program does, I hope, to improve your lives as caregivers. It is our goal to continue to provide the support, services, and tools, and the resources that you need to provide the very best care you can to the veterans in your life. Thank you.
I wish I brought my notebook with me, because that was a long list of new services and supports for this community. And I want to give a round of applause to Dr. Richardson, but the entire staff at the caregiver program in the VA all across the country who are making those exciting developments happen. As you also heard from Dr. Elnahal and Dr. Richardson, we were at the White House a couple weeks ago when President Biden announced the largest series of executive actions ever taken on caregiver support. Those actions are going to be a game changer. The developments and announcements that Dr. Richardson just announced are going to be game changers. This is progress across our community. As Senator Dole said, we have a lot more to do, but you just heard we're getting it done. We don't need to spend a lot of time making the case for why mental health resources for caregivers are so critical. America's facing a mental health crisis. That's across every member of the population. And as you heard from Dr. Richardson, veteran caregivers routinely experience those rates at much, much higher levels than non-caregivers. In fact, veteran caregivers are 4 times as likely to experience mental health challenges than non-caregivers. And at the foundation, we knew early on that this needed to be an area where the solution couldn't be simply left to the VA. Nonprofit organizations and private sector partners need to play a key part. And to lead the way, we at the Dole Foundation, with the support of Wounded Warrior Project, have been developing a mental wellness tool built by caregivers for caregivers. And for 2 years, this was a process started at this convening, a cohort of caregivers has participated in more than 30 working sessions to inform the design of this new tool, which we are calling our mental wellness framework. Caregivers can use this framework to identify the mental wellness challenges often associated with caregiving, and they can reference the recommended pathways to support. We know from experience that providing these tools to our caregivers, to caregiver support coordinators, to practitioners and providers, allows them to gain some context, right? Context is so important with what you deal with every day. You get thrust into situations, and you often don't know where to turn to for help. And sometimes you don't know that, as Dr. Richardson said, it's okay to not be okay. That's what this tool is going to allow you to forecast. And as many of you know, this map will identify common experiences, struggles, and transition points all along your journey and the journey of your peers. So it's widely used, the map that we produced at this convening several years ago, the Caregiver Framework Map, is still widely utilized across the VA and among our caregiver support coordinators all across the country. And that's the plan we have for this new tool. This mental wellness framework recognizes and validates the often unique mental wellness needs of caregivers and connects them to the resources that they need right now. And just like that journey map, EDF partnered with Philips. They are global leaders in the user design to ensure that the framework was clear, easy to use, and ultimately effective for each of you. We're going to make the framework widely available so that our partners can use it in their work with caregivers, and so that caregivers can use it themselves. Thank you to Kim Mingo. Kim, where are you? And the team at Philips for the extraordinary work that went into producing this invaluable new tool, especially to the cadre of caregivers who are here today that spent 2 years working on it. Here to tell us about that experience in creating the framework is Matt Templeton, Principal Design Strategist from Philips Experience Design. Matt is an artist, he is a designer, and he's an educator with experience in how making these things come to life. It's actually a really incredible process, and it's been remarkable to watch it unfold over the last 2 years. We're lucky to have him on the team, and I want to bring Matt up to the stage.
Hey everybody, I'm super excited to be here. And as Dr. Richardson was saying, I can empathize with lack of sleep. I'm suffering from that, but I'm ready to light it up. With a little help from my friends. Yeah. So Philips Design, we use human-centered design and design thinking in everything we do. And we enable that process throughout our organization and with our friends, families, stakeholders, everybody we play with. And I'm very humbled, grateful, and just psyched about this work coming to life. So there's printouts on your tables. So after this, you guys can check that out. There's a QR code there, so you can use that and look at it online. And like we just heard, you know, this work's been going on for a while. It was 2 years. And that's during COVID. So we got to know each other really well virtually, and we've really only hung out in person for an hour or two, which is kind of wild. But as a designer, you know, I've done a lot of this work using human-centered design, and it's about leading with empathy, listening, collaborating radically, and having a bias towards action. And this team just welcomed us in, and we rolled up our sleeves, and we got to work. And it's just the coolest work I've ever done, so I'm super psyched and honored to share it with you. So we have some friends in the audience, we have some friends here, we're gonna have a conversation, and as they come up and join me on stage, I invite you to watch a video we have for you.
The Elizabeth Dole Foundation, in partnership with Philips and powered by Wounded Warrior Project, is pleased to present their Caregiver Mental Wellness Framework, Created by caregivers for caregivers, this framework serves as the foundation for military and veteran caregivers to begin naming and nourishing integral elements of their mental wellness journey. From personal identity, compounding stress, and big emotions, to the power of peer-to-peer. Finding time, and identifying caregiver-specific resources. This framework provides caregivers and those who support them with a shared language to explore experiences and discover pathways for reflection, connection, and resources. To learn more, visit hiddenheroes.org/caregiver mental wellness.
All right. So I'd like to introduce the panel up here. I'm going to introduce some people we have in the audience and then some online. When I introduce you, if you're in the audience, if you can just stand so everybody can see you. So first we have Maggie Bristol, caregiver to her husband. We have Shirley Stanton, caregiver to her son and father. Marianne Delator, caregiver to her mom. And last but not least, Becca Mullaney, surviving spouse and EDF mental wellness consultant. In the audience, we have Colleen Rose, caregiver to her husband. Deb Elliott, caregiver to her husband. Sharon Grassi, caregiver to her son. Lacelle Perez Rogers, senior manager, clinical education and mental wellness. Betsy Evans, we can see you online, Betsy. Caregiver to her husband. And Liz Rotenberry, caregiver to her husband. So I'm the human-centered design guy, but luckily I had help from actual experts who knew something about therapy. And whenever I'd get over my skis, Becca was someone who always helped me pull things back together. And I think the idea was, when we'd meet, it was people should leave packaged and put back together and leave at least as good as they arrived, or hopefully better, but not worse. So we used to do check-ins. And we do check-ins and check-outs in design, but Becca does them to a different level. So Becca, I'd love it if you could lead us in a little check-in.
Thanks, Matt. I poured my therapist self all over this project. This group has been meeting for 2 and a little bit more years, and we've talked about some difficult topics and some really personal things, and they've been incredibly vulnerable. So it's important that, as caregivers know, sometimes you show up rushing from a meeting or in a meeting or at an appointment or having a bad day, so we check in. This group has become a family. We've had jobs, new jobs, old jobs. We've had almost 2 babies born. We have someone about to graduate college. People have moved, so we really care a lot about each other. So I'll model, because that's what we do. Today, I am feeling so proud of y'all and the work that we've done. I'm excited, and I think I'm really hopeful for the impact this is going to have on folks. So I'll ask you to share no more than 3 emotions that you might be feeling, and somewhere there may be a feelings wheel that we're going to share. So how you feeling, Matt?
Yeah, I'm feeling. A lot.
Yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah.
Come on, get real.
Yeah. I'm really thankful. I mean, y'all welcomed me in, and we were an amazing team. And I'm just so grateful for that. I'm also incredibly excited about this, and I'm curious to see the impact it has. I know it's going to have a great impact.
How about you, Ms. Maggie?
So I am extremely excited to be here to bring this caregiver map to life that we have poured so much love and trust and work into for so long. But like we were talking earlier, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of stress just because I'm not home. I'm not there to, head off any problems that come up, things like that. So it's a mix of emotions, but definitely ecstatic to be here. Thank you.
So glad you're here. How about you, Shirley?
I'm feeling a mix of emotions as well. Sometimes I feel like I might break down and cry a little bit because it can be very overwhelming leaving. Like she just left her family. I left my dad, who's living with me, and he's full-time service. He's 93 years old, and he had AFib. He's had a stroke. He recently fell, had fractured C5 and 6. So he had a collar on, and then he went and had his teeth pulled last week. So it's been a little bit of everything. Plus then my son, who has a lot of mental health issues. It can be very stressful. But I'm so excited to be here with our executive baddies. We have such a great team, and being behind the Zoom on your computer is one way of meeting. Obviously, it's like great that we get to meet each other often, but then to be here with everybody because we just feel the love, We do.
We do.
Yeah, you can tell Shirley's not passionate at all.
Very passionate.
How about you, Marianne?
I'm doing great. I have all the butterflies in the world and excitement. My mom, I hope you're watching. I like Shirley and Maggie. I'm thinking about my mom and my father, who are both in California right now. And they're passionate and they're enthusiastic in their 60s and 70s, and so I'm thinking about them from afar. And so I'm really excited to highlight and I'm proud to show the community that we've built through this process and highlight how this framework will really be impactful for our caregiver community and just really beyond for those who are caregiver champions.
Thanks. Thanks so much for doing that. And I challenge y'all to check in with yourself as you listen to people talk about real mental wellness issues in their lives. Back to you.
Thank you, Becca.
Yeah, just be here.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear some stories. We've been working together for over 2 years now, and we have this framework, which people have in their hands now. And I'd love to hear some stories about how y'all have been using it.
Let me start.
Sure.
Okay. So I actually, one of the organizations I also volunteer for is NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I am the state treasurer for New York. I am the veterans chair, and I'm also the veterans chair for our local chapter in NAMI Syracuse. And as a state trainer for NAMI Homefront, which is our class that actually focuses on family members, caregivers, the loved ones of our veterans, I use this when I'm teaching my teachers because it's just a great visual for helping them to help their participants get those emotions out and talk about their feelings and talk about the range of, loss and sadness to frustration and everything in between. As a teacher for that course, it's an amazing visual for our participants that may be entering the new normal, as we call it, or our caregivers that are new to this chapter in their lives. And having that visual in order to identify what they're really feeling to help them navigate the next several weeks, several months, several years has been an invaluable tool to use. And I have just been overwhelmed and just excited to use it because it has been such a positive asset to adding it to the program.
That's super awesome to hear. I think it's so powerful just to visualize some of this stuff. And
Yes.
I remember when we were together last year running that workshop, one of the caregivers was with me on a board with Post-its, and it's really heavy stuff, and she was like crying, and I was like, yeah, I know, and someone else came up and they were collaborating on it and visualizing it together, and then like 2 minutes later, the whole table was laughing. And it's so cool, I think that I'm hearing you say it enables people to be seen or
Yes.
heard.
Absolutely.
And identify where they're at.
It can be a struggle, especially when you are new to this role, being able to identify what is happening, what's going on, because you're so focused on your veteran, you're so focused on your loved one, you forget to focus on yourself.
Right.
And so having that visual to help you navigate your own feelings and your own emotions is such an incredible tool to have.
Right. That's awesome.
Yes, and I want to build on to that. I have used this framework to really inform the ways I approach peer support. I'm really proud to manage our Hidden Heroes caregiver community here at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and it's really it's really informed me how I look at caregivers who are newly self-identifying, those who are, going through the ebbs and flows, the highs and the lowest lows throughout their caregiving journey. In addition to caregiver survivorship, which we'll mention more later in the panels. And so as a result, it's teached me how to, and not only empower myself, but also empower other caregivers in our community and make sure that, they know that we're all together. They are combating social isolation, and in addition to just really building that community of connection. And for me personally, my caregiving journey started at age 11, so I'm excited to say I'm a hidden helper. And for me, one of my biggest challenges is really living my age, right? I'm in my mid-20s right now. And so this framework has really showed me how to really articulate that experience, but also remind me that there's other identities beyond caregiving. I can really seep into learning more about my heritage as a Filipino American, to even thinking about, hobbies and interests. And that's what really informs the multi-dimensional aspects of us as individuals and caregivers, and really lends to ensuring and reminding us that we have full agency over ourselves.
Great answer.
For me, the workbook is a valuable tool. You can put all the resources in your local area. It has the numbers to call out for suicide prevention, and it's at your fingertips. You can combine it and put whatever you need to for your certain area of where you live, and then make that tool just specialized just for you. So I pick up that framework and I look at it often. Plus, then I identify some of the feelings that I might be internalizing myself, because I go through an awful lot of stressors with my son. It is very overwhelming because he has a lot of forensic issues. And it's unique and it's totally different for me. I've been a nurse for 51 years now, and all the nursing experience, all the experience and education I've done has never been enough to fulfill what my needs are today. It's totally different. It's unique. Caregiving for the military was a new adventure for me that I have to tread slightly and very slowly on, because there's a lot of pain in there. There is a lot of isolation. So the framework can help me to bring myself back and pull myself out when I'm feeling down. And then sharing it with others. That is such an important thing that we can do as caregivers, helping other caregivers, because we are a team and we are growing and we are strong. No matter where we are, we do unite together, and it's a mighty force.
Oh, yes.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing those stories. And I look forward to hearing the new stories that come out of how this framework's used. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, we've worked together for a while now. How has this work been different than some of the other work you've all done?
Well, as I have mentioned, we are a unique family. We touch, we love, we care about each other. Yeah. We don't feel intimidated in any way to share whatever stories or whatever feelings we're having. We have grown in such a long way, and it's just a great feeling that I'm here today with them, because they accept me for who I am, I accept them for who they are, and we just continue to add on to everything that we've been doing. And it's an exciting adventure, that's all I can say. It's wonderful.
It is. Yeah. No, 100%. So the military caregiver community, as you said, is very unique in itself. And the fact that we were all able to get together and talk about mental health, mental wellness, and focus in on caregivers was such a unique role. For so long, like so many in this room, we have focused on our veterans. We have focused on caring for our loved one, what do they need, things like that. And this was almost a new work group of its kind, because it was, now we're focusing on ourselves. And that was actually very difficult the first session or two, because we were so used to talking about our veterans and our loved ones. What do they need? Now we're turning the conversation around and, well, what do we need? What do you need? What do you need? And so on. And that love, that trust, that camaraderie, and that willingness to, yeah, let's dive into those ugly feelings. Let's dive into those highs, those lows, so that we can really get a full world picture of the caregiver journey with mental wellness, so that we can help bring that to light. Was such an incredible opportunity as a group for us. It was.
Yeah, absolutely. Maggie and Shirley said it all. I also want to mention, and I say this a lot, it's a space of grace for ourselves as caregivers, but just also in general, our community. And so this is what made this work group particularly different, especially on a very professional project, right? And I do want to acknowledge all of the relationship dynamics here, right? So Shirley is a caregiver to her father and son, Maggie to her spouse, and me to my mother. And the fact that we're all able to connect on caregiving says a whole lot, and we're able to universalize that experience, despite differences, and also embrace that diversity and those walks of life that we've really carried on. And I've learned so much wisdom from everyone in the group, especially Maggie and Shirley, in addition to Matt and Becca. And so it's been an incredible process so far, and I'm excited to see how it lends itself to caregivers and building their own, communities and peer support programs there.
Absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. See, that's radical collaboration. So for the last question, this room is seeing this for the first time, and all our friends online are seeing this for the first time. So what are some key takeaways you want them to leave with here?
I think the biggest takeaway is that this framework has been studied, researched, talked about, feelings put into by caregivers, for caregivers. So we've lived it, we've gone through it, we have found ways to help us to deal and to cope with certain things. And I think that is the only way. So if you think about veterans and they go to their peer support groups, we have done the same thing here. So we are supporting the caregiver out there in the community. Take it, use it. You'll find it a valuable tool. It has helped us, and it can help you.
Yeah, I absolutely believe it captures and encompasses the caregiving journey. I think for those who are champions, who may not be caregivers right now or who are closely supporting a caregiver, this is a framework that can help you understand the experience, help you empower them to access resources, because if we know it well, a lot of our caregivers will tell you they have trouble, asking and reaching out for help because they do it all, right? And so it's acknowledging those signs. It's acknowledging, asking them for help, in addition to even helping them, perhaps identify as a caregiver. So if you're in the community and they're telling you, oh, I'm going to the appointments with my father, or I'm helping with medication management, oh, sounds like you're a caregiver, right? And so knowing that framework can help them empower them forward in their journey, and again, really foster that kindness so that they can go about their journey, supported in addition to, empowered.
Absolutely. I think, go ahead.
As the flight attendant tells you to put on your oxygen mask, you can't take care of anybody else unless you do that yourself. By using the framework, it will help. Don't stay in isolation. Don't hide in your house. Don't be afraid to look and reach out to people and use this. I have been in that place already myself. I used to have to travel all the way down to North Carolina from New York, put on my big girl panties because I never had to do that before. And it was really a difficult task for me to do, but I did it. Then when I got down with my son, he would take off and leave me, having great times while I stayed at home and I didn't know anybody there. It was a bad place to be. So use these things, use these tools, the framework. Seek out people, other caregivers. Don't waste your time and get sick, because it leads to depression and illness, and we don't want to see you there.
No, you gotta take care of yourself. I think one of the bigger takeaways that I would love for everyone to take away from this, whether in the room, online, wherever, is you are not alone. There are 5.5+ million of us in this country that are caring for our military loved ones. And it is okay to ask for help. We have put, blood, sweat, and tears, so to speak, into this framework, because the last thing that any of us in our whole group, because there were several of us in it, the last thing any of us would ever want is for anyone to go through starting out on this journey what we may have experienced ourselves. And the caregiving journey itself can be very isolating. It can be very, very lonely. And so one of the biggest things is, we've put all this time and effort into bringing to light, bringing a voice to this caregiver journey map, so that no one has to suffer, no one has to be in isolation. This map is here, utilize it, and, help it, because as you said, if you don't take care of you, you can't take care of your loved one. So taking that time, that little bit of self-care is so vitally important to all of our mental wellness.
Right. Thank you. So built by caregivers, for caregivers, collaboratively, to give caregivers the care they need. Let's give this crew a big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the stage Health Group Leidos, Liz Porter, Executive Vice President, Booz Allen Hamilton, Kevin Vigilante, Special Advisor to the Chief of Staff, Warrior Care Policy and Outreach, Wounded Warrior Project, Jonathan Pruden, Special Executive at Deloitte, Dr. Keita Franklin, and Executive Dole Foundation Executive Vice President, Rashi Romanoff.
Thank you so much. All these years doing the convening, you would think I would know better than to put myself right after a panel of our caregiver fellows. So I want to apologize in advance to our panelists. It's a hard group to follow, but we're so excited to bring the framework to everybody here today after so many years and months of working on it. Before we dive into our questions, how's everyone feeling? How are you guys thinking about the framework?
I'm excited. It was interesting to me. This is not only professionally important, but it's personally important. And listening to the framework and thinking about 28 years ago when I married my husband, who's active duty Navy, it would have been a great thing to have, because learning about those coping mechanisms and taking time for yourself and finding those other resources are something that would have been very beneficial as you navigate a military family life experience, and probably would position me well for whatever that next chapter is.
Yeah.
And like Liz said, I was wounded about 20 years ago, and nothing like this existed. I was 20 operations in 7 different hospitals. My wife, Amy, thankfully had a psych degree and was able to muddle through and figure out what was best. But it was lessons learned by hard knocks and striving. So having a tool like this is invaluable, and I'm excited we're getting to talk about it today.
Absolutely. So Jonathan, I'm going to sort of follow up with you first. Wounded Warrior Project, I just want to thank in the room, really has been with us since day one of this project. It started, right at those early days of COVID. We said, hey, I think there's a need. Can you guys help us with it? And as always, as they do for so many in the room, they said, yes, absolutely. How can we help? How do you see this tool complementing the work of Wounded Warrior Project?
Sure. Well, as I looked at this, I got the draft, I was like, some of this is familiar. We have a peer mentoring model that was started by my dear friend Jim Mayer years ago, and it goes through the process of recovery for warriors, right? And one of the big images we always put out is a roller coaster, that journey is not linear, right? There's ups and downs throughout the journey. The caregiver journey map that was put together by Senator Dole and Steve and your whole team a few years ago has been invaluable in educating both our staff and VA staff on what that journey looks like for caregivers. And this is the next logical step, this mental wellness framework. And it really hits on some of the struggles that our caregivers are facing. They are, as Senator Dole said, some of the most amazing, inspiring folks on the planet, but they're humans, right? And years of caregiving take their toll. And I think that this tool will allow our staff, I think VA staff, partners, to have a framework to look at, because one of the things you can do that I always coach our staff on is look at where the caregiver is in their journey. Don't assume it's linear. And in doing that, you can find what the resources are that are appropriate. So, we have an emergency financial assistance team. To me, that's a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound, right? That's when everything's failed, we're stopping the bleeding, that's it, right? All the way through our Warriors to Work team. I'm sure you're familiar with our Independence program for our most catastrophically injured families. We have 20 different programs and services, and recognizing where they are in their journey, but also where the caregivers are emotionally, is critical to plugging them into the right resources at the right time. And that's internally, and that's in our partners in VA and DOD and EDF.
Yeah, that right resource at the right time, I think, is something that is so, so important. Kita, I'm thrilled that Deloitte is joining us here today, and I'm very excited to announce that EDF has recently teamed up with the Deloitte team to turn all of these frameworks into a new digital resource that will be able to be accessed from all over the country by caregivers in all necks of the woods.
Yep.
Kita, yep, absolutely, thank you. Kita, talk to me a little bit about why Deloitte wants to take this on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the panel said it themselves before, but the caregiver piece and being able to work in the mental health space with the caregivers is likely, I think, one of the most important things that the nation can do for them at this time. And the fact that they're struggling with mental health issues is no surprise after, decades of caregiving. And myself, it was probably just a few years ago when I went to lunch with Steve Schwab and even realized the full scope of who is a caregiver, despite being in the field as a social worker for over 20 years and working with active duty troops and veterans. My own father was in the Navy, and my sister has cerebral palsy, my only sibling with a seizure disorder, and never thought of myself as a caregiver, but certainly I know her medication routine, and certainly was quite responsible for her over the years while our family moved around to various Navy bases. And so it was Steve, I think, that actually said to me, that's caregiving. And so I think this is just so important in terms of taking care of the mental health of the caregivers. And I'm pleased that I'm at a firm like Deloitte where we're stepping up and able to partner with EDF on this, making the tool digital in such a way that caregivers can access it. We access things online all the time. And so easy access, a tool that can be updated if needed, and even perhaps on the phone, on the fly, and just making it more user-friendly. I think people might think of Deloitte as like a big accounting firm. That's likely what I thought before I joined the firm. What is one of the big four accounting firms doing in the mental health space? But in fact, I'm on my first year journey here at the firm, and there's a big dedication to military and veteran work. When I joined, there was already this well underway, this veteran suicide prevention initiative, where we brought together 140 public-private partners to develop solutions. And this EDF work, I think, is an extension of that work, where we can continue to offer support to the community, many in this room, and hope to be a long-term partner with EDF on this work going forward.
Absolutely. Well, I think Deloitte's doing something right with bringing you on, and I think it'll be a really exciting journey that we're going on with you. Liz, I want to bring you into the conversation. We are thrilled to have Leidos here because I think you guys you have a really interesting perspective on the challenges facing families through the critical counseling support services that you're providing to military families, through the Military and Family Life Counseling Program at DOD. You really see the full continuum of mental health needs from DOD across. How are you sort of thinking about this at Leidos, and how are you integrating these kinds of mental wellness offerings into the work that you do?
So thank you, and I am thrilled to be here. This is really important work, and hearing from and meeting many of the caregivers, which has been phenomenal. But thinking about, when we look at it from Leidos, we're thinking about it from that full continuum and looking at it from a total health perspective. I was definitely brought to light thinking of, we do everything from cancer research, where they're looking at the RAS initiative and the work that we do with the National Cancer Institute, trying to figure out how to cure some of these cancers that we're now seeing impacted through the PACT Act. And because we work with both military service members and their families through to veterans, being able to think about where are those points of interconnectedness, to think about not only the service member, but their family members. And hearing Sean's story really brought it home, because my first duty station with my husband was an NAF at Sugi. And I know in my medical record that my location in proximity to a very toxic incinerator that was located off base is recorded. And who knows what that means for myself and my family in the future. But knowing that how that impacts the military service members and their families, and thinking about not only their physical well-being, but their mental well-being and their spiritual well-being, and then looking at how and where the financial pieces come in and how that ecosystem of programs can be maximized, and knowing that I can take advantage of them too and see where those challenges come in, even if it's interacting with the health system. And so really trying to take a look at that from a holistic perspective and hopefully make an impact in a small way.
Absolutely. Kevin, I know you've worn a lot of different hats. You've worked in a lot of different healthcare environments over the years.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of mental wellness tools that are out there. Personally, I know I'm getting pop-ups and things on Instagram saying, have you tried this? Have you tried this? How do you, as a clinical leader, sort of differentiate between some of that noise?
It's tough, and it's tougher, because every day there's a new app that's gonna, take care of your mental health stuff, and deep breathing is great, and yoga is great. But it's not always the answer, right? And there's probably other things that are, and I got to say that I've spent many years, before I came to Boozy Allen. I was 20 years in academic medicine, and a lot of tools I saw, even yes, it's important that things are evidence-based, but very often they had an academic flavor that was more, it almost seemed more in the interest of the researchers and their research rather than serving the community that needed help. And so what I really like about this framework is that it is evidence-based, but it really is driven by the end users and the community. And it is so important, the concept of user-centered design, human-centered design, is so important to bring to this environment, and it's not that typical, quite honestly. It's such an important thing to do. And so, I think that involving the community is what sort of differentiates this here. And I think we also, we talk a lot about the social determinants of health. Mm-hmm. But we need to be thinking about the social determinants of well-being. And, and I was talking to Jill DeBoer, who's sitting at my table there, who's the executive director for care management and social work, yes. and she was talking about, we really need to integrate that into our understanding of these, of each individual caregiver, because while they face a common challenge in many ways, everyone has a unique challenge because they're all a little different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a tool has to be adaptable to that.
Yeah. And so I'm going to pull on that thread a little bit.
Yeah.
When we think about adaptable tools and the evidence base, I know we've been having some exciting conversations with Booz Allen. Anything you want to share?
Well, we are really very pleased to announce that we're going to, with the Dole Foundation, co-create what we call a caregiver compass, with the idea that we're going to take this great work, the framework, and bring it down to a more individual level, with the idea that we would be able to create an assessment tool for each individual caregiver to understand, as you said, you got to understand where they are in their journey. Mm-hmm. So to enable the Dole Foundation to better help them, better attach them to resources, and in some ways come up with a plan. For instance, you may have some financial struggles, but it may, and that's an issue, but it also may be an issue that you don't have the skills, the financial skills to figure out how to navigate that. And so how do we give people those skills? And so that means creating this caregiver compass will help us help the caregivers develop a plan to move forward. And so, but we need their help, again. So we started out with engaging the community, and we need to come back to the community. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a link displayed, and I don't know, Rush, where it's going to be.
On the map, if you see, there's a QR code on the back of all of the handouts.
So to everybody sitting in the audience, caregivers, helpers, organizations, if you would respond to that link, we're going to create learning circles, right, now to go that will inform us. Think of it as sort of an R&D phase, right, to go on and create this caregiver compass as the first step. If you will sign up there, we'll engage you, and we look forward to doing that. And I think that, look, the most important thing that keeps us all going is hope. Yeah. But hope without a plan is a fantasy. Yeah. And I think what we really want to do is help us now customize plans for each individual caregiver every way along the journey so that we can better match them to resources and better help hidden heroes and their hidden helpers. So,
yeah.
Good. Excellent.
We're so excited about this. I think, this challenge of getting the right resource to the right person at the right time is so critically important. And one of the things we talked a lot about in the framework, even definitions and words like self-care, just they mean different things to different people. As a new mom, I always say, nothing's worse than someone saying, oh, I'll watch go to a yoga class, and then you just spend the whole yoga class thinking oh my God, this is everything I need to do. So that right resource, right time, right person, I think is so important. Yeah. And our last sort of question that I want to put out to everybody, what do you all say? I loved your sentiment about hope. What are the biggest opportunities? Sort of putting your organizational hats to the side, as you all are thinking about, as leaders in the space, the opportunities for us to innovate around mental wellness, given some of the needs that you heard about in the earlier panel. What do you all think are the biggest opportunities?
I can maybe start. I think that, having spent my last few assignments in the area of suicide prevention, so when things go tragically, sort of not tragically terrible, outcomes around mental health, when we think about innovation, I think it's this idea, particularly around this tool and others that we talked about today, around connection. So innovative tools that can help people connect, I think, are definitely the way of the future. We want people to connect in person. We want people to connect in healthy ways with IT platforms. But social support and connection, which I know Elizabeth Dole is all about in terms of bringing the caregivers together, making sure people know they're not alone. But I think anything at the hub of the wheel of connection would be helpful for everybody in the nation, not just caregivers.
Amazing.
And I couldn't agree more heartily with that. I think also, I heard some exciting news today from VHA, from Dr. Richardson, about new initiatives to support caregivers, telehealth initiatives for mental health for our caregivers, but expanding that to include mental health, substance abuse supports when that's needed, right? That's an area that I think is underutilized by our caregivers and under-offered by our community, and it's a place we could go that would, I think, help save and change some lives.
I'd like to add to that I think, especially even looking at the framework, thinking about how and where else this can be applied. I think we heard from some of the panelists that, the military service member, veteran, doesn't want to be a burden. So how do we help them, innovate with them on the coping tools and mechanisms sooner and well before they need it, as well as the early military spouse, so that we can kind of get ahead of this, right? There's so much that this brings to light on how you can turn it into a tool that others can use to learn the capabilities that they have, bringing that in sooner so that we can get to the point where we're ahead of a lot of this, and some of, especially in the mental health space, we'll really stay ahead of.
Yeah, I think that, as we create more data, and particularly at the individual level, as that becomes more robust, we will have the ability not just to react, but maybe to predict and anticipate where needs are going to be so that we can intervene. And I do think as we develop AI tools and analytic tools, I think as we gather the data, there may be opportunities there. But the social connection thing is just so, we really still, in this day and age, we don't understand the power of the group. Why the group gives you so much strength when you draw from peers, but the peer-to-peer theme and creating tools that enable that, to me, using digital tools and whatever, overcoming the barriers of distance and geography, to me, those are really going to be an important part of creating the kind of connections that you talked about, because they're essential.
They're powerful. And that,
They are, yeah.
I met a lady named Laura Gary at the beginning of this game. Never met her before.
Yeah.
I was out here having coffee, and she is an amazing woman. And the 15 minutes I got to talk with her, I got to know that her husband passed from ALS. But she is such a strong advocate for that community and has written a book and offered me and our warriors and our veterans the resources of somebody who's been down that particular journey that's different and unique from other journeys. And that power of having walked down that path and being able to say, you're not alone, been through this, and here's how you can best use VA, DoD, that power of peers. And you guys recognize this with your fellows.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly powerful tool.
Perfect. Well, that is the perfect segue, actually, to our next set of programming. So I want to give our panelists a huge round of applause.
Thank you, Rashi.
Please welcome back to the stage Elizabeth Dole Foundation CEO, Steve Schwab.
Thank you. I want to give a big thank you to that panel. I don't know about you, but I was really excited about the news and the commitments that we got from our partners. A lot of progress is being made today, and I'm so grateful to each of them for those concrete commitments. Now, if we all do our part, if we all play to our strengths and contribute where we can, we will continue to reduce the struggles of our caregivers. For the second half of our day, we are going to focus on one of the most significant periods of many caregiving journeys. And this is something we as a community don't talk enough about. And it's one that few are prepared for: the transition from being a caregiver to a survivor. Often when we talk about this transition, our primary concern is the grief that accompanies the devastating moment of losing your care recipient. However, for caregivers, the loss of a loved one is more than just emotional hardship. Becoming a survivor means caregivers enter a new phase of unknowns as they manage end-of-life care. Caregivers also must navigate the complexity of benefit system that changes, sometimes rapidly, during and after the loss of their veteran. And similarly, transitioning to a survivor comes with consequential changes to their social, legal, and financial standings. And I think perhaps most importantly, caregivers experience a jarring sense of their change in identity, from being abruptly recast from being a caregiver to a survivor. And we've heard a lot today about how it takes time for caregivers to even acknowledge that they're a caregiver. Kita, Dr. Franklin told us it took a lunch with me to shake her and say, you know, you are a caregiver. So we see that in a very profound way as they transition to survivors. So many survivors struggle to reconcile who they were before that caregiving role and who they are now that it has concluded. Each and every one of us gathered here today have the opportunity to make this experience more transparent, more manageable, a little less emotionally disruptive. We have to prepare caregivers with the knowledge and information about this profound transition. And to that end, I'm really excited to announce that EDF, with our great friends and partners at TAPS and the Red Cross Military Veteran Caregiving Network, are unveiling a groundbreaking report today on the Caregiver to Survivor journey. The Caregiver to Survivor project was designed to increase our collective understanding of the experience of military and veteran caregiver survivors along their journey of grief toward a future of healing, and an understanding of what we need to do to support them. We asked someone that many of you in this room know, Dr. Linda Davis, to lead this charge and to assemble a report in and across our 3 organizations. It wasn't easy work. We're all opinionated. We all come from our areas of expertise, and Dr. Davis wrangled us all into submission and brought together a really thought-provoking, incredible, and important report. As you may know, Dr. Davis is nationally recognized for her leadership in the development and implementation of programs that support the full spectrum of quality of life services for military personnel, veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors. And her experience includes previously serving as the VA's Chief Veterans Experience Officer. In fact, her successor is here and his predecessor is here, so we've got lots of Chief Veterans Experience Officers in the house today. And she also served as the DoD's Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Military, Community, and Family Policy. Linda is a standout champion, a friend, and an ally of military and veteran caregivers. Please welcome Dr. Linda Davis.
Thank you, my friends, here in the room and watching at home or in your offices. I appreciate taking a few moments, having a few moments to create this, what was referred to as this space of grace, this space where those of us who have been caregivers, who have received care, who have had that journey, who are still having that journey, who will have that journey, those of us who have made the transition, as our dear Elizabeth Dole referred to, the solemn transition, who have lived through the moments that matter as caregivers and have then experienced the moments, the shattering moments of that experience of loss and grief, and how to live through those moments. All of us will be survived by somebody, and we will all survive the loss of somebody dear. So I'd like to share a few minutes with you about the importance of that journey of loving, caring, losing, grieving, and living on, that notion of hope. I'd like to share about the findings that we had in this report, which we have shared widely, including with our colleagues and supporters and advocates at VA and DoD, in the hopes that together we can ensure that this community of support, that, as was said this morning, caregivers are not broken, veterans and military members are not broken, and survivors are not broken either. But we know that unless they are supported, they can break. So let's talk a little bit about this report now. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking in the wrong place. So we're going to highlight what we found in the report. The report was stimulated by the finding that was shown to the Federal Advisory Committee of the changing nature of loss among our military and veteran families. And that is, it was no longer hostile, as was referred to of the 9/11. It was no longer the hostile deaths after that, but it was the deaths due to illness loss, illness and injury,
And then also it was from suicide, the tragic losses there. This caught the eye of Senator Elizabeth Dole and the Federal Advisory Committee and motivated us to do this report. The profile of the survivors is very complex, as it is for the caregivers. It's all eras, it's all causes of illness and injury, it's all causes of loss due to suicides, due to medications, due to complex mental illness challenges, to accidents. We know now, especially as was mentioned with the PACT Act, not only do we have 5.5 million caregivers, just adults, but we also have this growing number of survivors, and those will be recognized and supported by the VA in the coming years if we help to identify them and call out their needs. What we found in looking at this, the body of knowledge, we worked with the Center of Excellence for Veteran and Caregiver Research, named after Senator Dole, to do an extensive, exhaustive review of the literature. We worked with focus groups, deep dive, as been mentioned here, the value of listening to the voice of the survivor, both the survivor who was a caregiver of illness loss and suicide loss. We also did numerous surveys, as they are doing in the VA, to understand the experience, what was valued by the survivors. And we worked with many different organizations, including the Office of Survivor Assistance at the VA. All of this gave us, and building on the international community of survivors and grief, the Choose Home initiative at the VA earlier on, and also the RAISE task force and others. This is what we found. It helped us understand what was important to the caregivers here. And we will be discussing this very soon with all of our members of our team. So research findings, once these were identified, the key was, what do we do with these? These are not findings that you are surprised by. No one in this room is surprised to understand the complexity of changing roles. Planning and meeting legal needs is a challenge. Juggling ongoing care roles. Accessing mental health services, which we just hear. None of these are surprising to you. The issue is, what do we do with them, especially areas for not only adults but children and youth. So what we did was look at and ask our caregivers and survivors, what do you recommend? What is important to you? What worked? And this is in the report. You will see a compendium of what the survivors and caregivers themselves told us was valuable for them. It's a great reference, as is the research that was done. We're going to be talking today with EDF, with TAPS, and with the Red Cross MVCN about each of these key areas and what they are doing. But it wasn't enough. There was action needed, and each of the organizations pledged to do something about what they had heard. And you're going to hear today some of the initiatives that each will have already taken in the case of Red Cross and their wonderful resource directory, what EDF is doing and what TAPS is doing and excited to do in conjunction with the VA. So I want to leave you with the thoughts, and it's hard for me to be quiet, as you all know, and not talk about this, because it is such a sacred and personal journey to me. But we believe that America's military and veteran caregivers and survivors, they have in fact been the hearts and the hands of the nation, as we have loved and cared for those who have served us all. And our obligation is to give them our attention, respect, and unwavering support, and this must be equal to the magnitude of their sacrifice. So I'd like to ask Steve and Bonnie and Melissa to come up and join me now, and we'll talk about what we've learned and what we're going to do. And we'll assign you all probably something too.
Thank you, my friends. Look at red, white, and blue.
Oh my gosh.
First of all, each of you and your teams created something very powerful in this report. It was a joint effort with a lot of work from the VA also. So thank you, thank you. I think this story, as Melissa will highlight, this story doesn't just happen the moment someone dies. It happens well before. And so I wanted to take the parts of the report and dig a little bit deeper into each of your areas of expertise. You each have a unique but complementary mission. So can you tell me, starting at the beginning, Melissa, when we had the caregiver survivors, the illness, the suicide loss survivors, they told us that the number one thing that they were concerned about, they said their findings we had there, managing the safety of themselves and the family, the stigmas that they experienced and barriers to access of health before and after death, and then identifying and assessing resources. What they wanted was to increase resources and services for the entire caregiver and caregiver survivor journey before and after there was in fact a death. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience in the work you do and what action you will be taking in this area?
Yes, thank you. And I have to start by saying I hold many caregiver survivors, their families, and their children in my heart. And so hearing from them and the work we did together about the need for resources and a comprehensive understanding of what those resources would be, both prior to the loss and after the loss. And so we worked to look for anticipatory grief, ambiguous grief. Sometimes you don't even know why you're grieving. It's a long process. People often assume grief is only after the loss, but I know from my work with our caregivers that it happens a lot, early and often. Every diagnosis, every timeline, there's another loss to grieve. So we worked with our amazing resource directory called the Hero Care Resources at the American Red Cross, and you can go to redcross.org/HeroCareResources to develop a caregiver survivor folder of resources that were most relevant to caregivers on this journey. And we didn't just keep that to ourselves, we're a wonderful partnership, and we also shared it with the National Resource Directory and had them add survivor and caregiver to survivor to their tags, as well as Code of Support's Patriot link to make sure all resources directories that are out there and used by our community understand this important journey, the solemn journey, as Senator said.
And so your resource, your Hero Care, that also has all of the resources that were highlighted by survivors and caregivers as useful in the report, what we heard from them. Thank you very much, Melissa. Bonnie, one of the other key things that we heard, Kevin just referred to peer support, and we hear that theme. Our respondents both to the surveys and the in-person focus groups and the research deep dive into highlighted the importance, the necessity of peer support, but also its value, particularly in grief and especially in traumatic loss from suicide. Can you tell us a little bit about what TAPS has been doing for decades in that area, and what you will be doing in the future?
Absolutely. And 30 years ago, when my husband was killed in an Army aviation accident, what most people don't know is that 7 months before, he had been diagnosed with very aggressive hepatitis and was given zero chance to survive and sent home on hospice to die. That summer, for 6 months, I had to keep working. We had 2 foster children. And it was just this constant fear and anxiety and sleeplessness and prayers for a miracle. And the miracle, I'm sorry, I haven't shared this, but, and the miracle came, and he did survive. 6 weeks after he was back on duty and had been promoted to general officer, his career we thought was really back on track, then he was suddenly and tragically killed. I founded TAPS to fill a gap in those services that were available to surviving families grieving a loss of any sort in the military. But it wasn't until I connected again with so many of our families coming to us suffering an illness loss, who were grieving that experience through the lens of having been a caregiver, that I started to put the pieces together and recognize that that had been part of my journey as well. It was hard to struggle thinking that Tom had survived, and then to grieve his death after we had overcome that challenge. TAPS was created now nearly 30 years ago to fill that void, but it was built on the foundation of the strength of peer-based emotional support. Grief is not a mental illness. Grief is not a physical injury. I wish we could just take a pill or put a splint on it and it would have this nice, neat healing trajectory, but it doesn't do that. Grief is all over. It is a normal human response to the death of a loved one. It is more about the love than it is about anything else. We only grieve because we love. So at TAPS, we have a saying that love lives on, that love transcends the death of our loved one, that we remember them, we honor them, and they are always with us. But now, as military survivors, we must form a new identity for ourselves. I think we're the only type of loss in our society where we actually get a new government-issued ID. That's kind of a crazy thing, but we do, and we have a new status. This is so complicated for those who come to TAPS as caregivers, because not only are they grieving a loss, which may have come with relief if their loved one was suffering tremendously. So then we go back and grieve the life of the healthy person that we knew and love and continue to love. So over the past 30 years, TAPS has from day one embraced caregivers to survivors, and it wasn't until, though, partnerships like with Dave McIntyre now nearly 25 years ago, Dave, and with Senator Dole, and the love that I've witnessed for so many decades between you and your precious husband, and love that I know will live on forever, that we now have this powerhouse group to bring you this report, to bring you these resources. The four of us here on the stage have worked tirelessly to create this document, and it will be a living document, but it is done with the love and the care of each and every one of you. So thank you, and thank you for allowing me this safe space, just to know that we're all in this together.
And I know the ongoing seminal work that TAPS has done in peer-based emotional support for survivors of all ages and all causes, whether it's related to active duty service or whether it's from an illness or an injury, including all those toxic exposure losses that will occur, that TAPS will be there. Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you for the work you're going to be doing in this area with our gold coats and the VA. Steve, it has been mentioned over and over, the challenges of not being prepared, not being ready, and that's what the survivors told us, that they wanted maybe not a roadmap, because grief doesn't happen like that, but they at least wanted to have some advanced information so they could avoid some of the large tsunamis that come with the grief. Tell us what you're doing and these wonderful things you've announced today that will help empower the caregiver to be more ready to anticipate not only the care part, but their journey after, legally and financially even.
Yeah, Linda, that's right. And before I start, Bonnie, I want to thank you for sharing what you shared with us. I've never heard you say that before. But I also want to thank Bonnie, because it was Bonnie that came to us, 2 years ago, maybe a little more than that, and said, we need to dive deeper on this caregiver to survivor front. And certainly the work that Senator Dole had been doing with Bonnie, Linda, myself, Melissa, we're all members of the Federal Advisory Committee with caregivers, families, and survivors. We were looking at the entire continuum. And out of that organized conversation and analysis, Bonnie came to us and said, and facilitated by Linda, let's get this work done. And so now we have a report that benefits from the full value of 30 years of work at TAPS, working with a community that before then was largely ignored formally. And now we see a segment of that community that deserves another level of support And you heard a lot of things announced today, and what I'll just preview from EDF in this particular area is where we're going to be investing right away is to, on Linda's point, we spent so much time preparing journey maps and understanding the experience of those we serve. We're going to make sure that there's an understanding from caregivers what they need to be prepared for as they transition to the survivor status. And that means unveiling a whole series of web-based tools for planning, financial support, planning support, estate support. You're going to hear more about that on the next panel. We're really excited also that today is just the beginning. I mean, we've actually, how long have we been doing the report now? A little over a year, almost 2 years? 3 years?
It's
So,
very thorough.
We've done the pre-work. The report is furnished. Everyone's going to benefit from it. But if you know Linda like I know Linda, we've got a year-long plus plan of dissemination and work to work with Congress, to work with additional partners, to take this on the road, and to explore where else these findings and these recommendations will take us by way of more systemic support across the board. But, you know, Bonnie, I just want to thank you for blazing the trail before, for sharing your story, Melissa, for your great partnership at Red Cross, and Linda, for your leadership on this.
Thank you, Steve. It's a joint effort. You can get the report on either the EDF or the TAPS websites. They have a /caregiver or caregiver survivor link that you can go. Please do that. Use it as a resource for yourselves. And as Senator Dole alluded to, I am confident that President Lincoln's statement, as thankfully the VA has now addressed it straight on, did not mean to exclude anyone who served, no matter how they died. Neither did it mean to exclude any caregiver or any survivor, no matter how that loss occurred. And together we can all make sure that they are respected, honored, and supported. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dole.
Do I just go? Good afternoon, everybody. Pete Jeffries here with AARP's Veterans and Military Families Initiative. First off, let's commend those three organizations we just had up there, Dole Foundation, TAPS, and the Red Cross for this new report. Of course, this is no doubt an issue that's top of mind for so many, and it's great to see those three organizations coming together to address it collectively. At AARP, we're also taking this issue very seriously and have created a myriad of resources to support families as they prepare for this transition. I'm honored to moderate this esteemed thought leader panel today because myself, I am a veteran caregiver survivor. I cared for my ailing father in the last 4 years of his life, a U.S. Army Korean War combat vet. But before we dive into the panel, I want to make a bit of news right here off the top. At AARP, we just released a new poll focused on caregiving and the impact on voters. Being in Washington, D.C. today, as well as across the country online, we can all agree we need politicians, the media, and the opinion elite to take notice that we caregivers are a very potent voting bloc. In fact, in our recent poll, we found that 78% of voters are either current, past, or will be caregivers in the future, and 70% support lawmaker actions in Congress and elsewhere to alleviate some of the stresses and burdens on the caregiving community, including tax credits to help pay for out-of-pocket costs. Our pollster even said caregiving may be the sleeper issue of the 2024 elections. So at AARP going forward, we are going to start to sample caregivers as that important voting block for all of our voter engagement polls forthcoming. So let's start with John Borchler, Chief of the Veterans Experience Office at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. What are your reactions to the report I just tossed on the floor, to this new report about caregiver survivors?
Well, yeah, can you hear me okay? Well, if not, if this thing isn't working, I can use my sergeant voice. But thanks so much for having me once again. It's great to be back with y'all. Oh, I can hear it now. We, as Dr. Davis mentioned, have not only been able to use a lot of the insights from the report currently, but I think we're going to be able to use the insights from the report moving forward as we continue to improve the caregiver experience and the survivor experience, but connecting them together as we just heard about. As many of y'all know, we did a deep dive with Dr. Richardson's team and many other stakeholders and Jill's team as well last year on the caregiver experience, and have since launched our first V-Signals survey for caregivers, and have gleaned some incredible quantitative results on top of the existing qualitative insights. We're doing the same thing with the survivor experience currently, in partnership with TAPS, in partnership with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, in partnership with Red Cross, and many of you. We're diving into that to improve not only the survivor experience and learn from those qualitative insights, but then also launch a survivor V-Signals survey later this year. And what's most important, thank you, all right.
Everybody can clap, that's fine.
Most importantly, and I believe 2 panels ago we heard about the PACT Act, we're learning more and more about how we can better outreach to survivors and their families so that they can learn more about their benefits. We have a lot of work to do in this area, and we need all of your help to help get the word out about the PACT Act, the expanded care and benefits provided by the PACT Act. So there's a lot that we can glean from the report and work jointly together to improve the caregiver to survivor experience.
We'll come back with some follow-ups in just a minute, but let's get to Jill. Jill DeBoard is the Executive Director of Care Management and Social Services at the Veterans Health Administration. Given your role at VHA, what programs and services currently exist for caregivers?
Very good question. Thank you so much. So first of all, it's such an honor to be with you all here today. In Care Management and Social Work Services, all of our programs, which include Fisher House and Family Hospitality, Intimate Partner Violence Assistance Program, social work, military to VA case management, the VA Liaison Program, and care coordination and integrated case management, all of them provide services in different ways to our veterans, caregivers, families, and survivors. But I'm really honored and proud to be here today to talk a little bit about a new program in Care Management and Social Work Services for VHA, which is our Survivor Assistance and Memorial Support Program. Hot off the presses, we just renamed it. So Dr. Elna Hall just last month signed the memo of support for this program, and it is brand new to VHA. It will allow us, and we're currently building this program as we speak, to provide standardized both business and clinical services to our veterans, caregivers, and survivors, connecting them to those resources and benefits in a way that will support them through the continuum of grief and loss. And then also just to take in some of the information from the Caregiver to Survivor report that we just have read. It's really heartening to me to see that it so closely aligns with the work we're doing. The things that we saw as a gap and things we could do so much better for our families, caregivers, and survivors are going to be addressed with this new program that's under development. So really excited about it. And my plan is that next year at the convening, we'll be able to report a fully operationalized program across VHA in all of our medical centers. And really moving the needle in the survivor experience in VA. So I'm hopeful that I can tap into the collective knowledge of this group today. We really want your input and thoughts on what could make this a powerful program that will support our veterans and their families, caregivers, and survivors. So thank you for the question.
Before we get to David, quick follow-up
Sure,
on that.
sure.
So if the community writ large wants to help contribute feedback and ideas, how should they do that?
Oh, good question. Okay, so I can share with the group. We have some different websites that we could share that we'd be able to get the feedback from you. We also have established a few work streams where we've solicited feedback from stakeholders across VA, as well as our veteran service organizations. And again, today I'm going to be here throughout the afternoon. I would be so happy to talk to anyone about this program. We're very excited about it, the potential for it. So if you've got feedback, I'd love to hear it.
There you go, everybody in the room. She's going to be here later. Give her the feedback.
Please.
We're going to turn over to David Evitz now. He's the leader of the USAA's educational foundation that improves financial readiness for the military and local community. With this new report from EDF, TAPS, and Red Cross, let's talk about the role that financial uncertainty plays as we think about advanced care planning. So at USAA, what are you doing to address that issue, that concern?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. And you kind of hit it on the head. I mean, USAA is the sponsor of the USA Educational Foundation. We're a separate nonprofit that educates military families and now caregivers about basic financial needs, how to make a budget, how to get out of debt, how to manage debt. And what we really care about, regardless of your USA membership, is that you're educated and you can make smart purchases whenever that happens in your time of life. And when you think about the caregiver to survivor continuum, it's not that much different than financial planning. You're always thinking about the future, you're mitigating near-term risk, and you're trying to invest and think about how you plan and are ready for the future. Now, we also know that no one plans to be a caregiver, and it happens overnight. And when you think about the unique needs of a caregiver, financial planning is not the top of the list. It's probably not number 2, and it's probably not number 3. We get it. We're often the asparagus on the steak plate. But when you think about what a caregiver goes through financially, we also often say that the military spouse is the CFO of the household. When you're a post 9/11 caregiver, 98% of post 9/11 caregivers are the CFO of the household. 62% of caregivers report financial strain within the last year. And then 45%, I'll get this, 45% say that they will either quit their job or they will accept the job for lower pay or less benefits in order to manage their caregiver lifestyle. So you add all that in addition to sometimes benefits are hard to understand. It's very hard to manage income just in general. And that's why we're so proud to partner with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. We saw these issues happening, and we talked with them, and we said, how can we help? And what we've announcing today is that we're going to kick off work to provide tailored financial education built by caregivers. And so the Elizabeth Dole Foundation team is leveraging all their insights to then bring it back to us and our certified financial planners collaboratively build something together that's built by caregivers, tailored to caregivers, and it can be easily part of your caregiving support. And that is our intent, and we hope to launch that by the end of this year.
Cool. So before the new program is developed, how can folks that are either in the room or online watching get to learn more about what USAA can do to fill the void right now?
Absolutely. So just go to usaaef.org. That is our website. It's built. You can snackable, answer a single question, or you can go through a whole learning guide on a financial topic. It's there for you. It's free, unbiased, objective of any kind of product selling or anything like that. It's built for you and your lifestyle.
Excellent. So, John, knowing that caregiving and survivorship is an issue that transcends across health, benefits, cemetery, survivor support, any last words for the community here to hear straight from the Chief Veterans Experience Officer?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working with our partners, many of whom in this room are definitely going to be a part of or are already a part of really that full journey, as I mentioned earlier. And if you didn't know, the Veterans Benefits Administration does provide financial planning. They do provide advanced care planning, memorial planning, and most importantly, delivers survivor benefits. So we're going to package all of that in a much more consumable way, because a lot of VA resources and benefits, and it's kind of hard to understand, and that's really our job in the Veterans Experience Office, is to make it easier for veterans and their families to understand. So we'll be working with all of you to learn from these insights, learn from the surveys, and then package that in a more consumable way moving forward.
That's excellent. I can tell you this from an AARP perspective. We worked with your office in producing a pamphlet that is about VA burial benefits and survivor benefits. It is traditionally and historically the #1 downloaded document off of aarp.org/veterans. That's aarp.org/veterans. That's where you can go and find all of the support services and resources we have. But again, thank you to you and your team, and let's give this panel an entire round of applause. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Dole Caregiver Fellow Laura Gary.
You hear that? That's my tribe. This is going to be a hard one, guys. My husband, United States Air Force veteran, Tom Gary, passed away just 10 months ago on July the 15th, 2022. In 2016, Tom was diagnosed with ALS. That's also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, the ice bucket challenge disease. And in the military and veteran space, that is known as a service-connected disease. Veterans are diagnosed at a higher rate than those that never served. We learned of this connection at the same time that Tom received his preliminary diagnosis. In fact, after only a few months of testing, the doctor told us that while she had a few more tests to run, because ALS is a diagnosis of elimination, she wanted to ask Tom 2 questions. Did he serve in the military? And did his service take him into the Middle East in support of the first Gulf War? With his answer of yes to both, she said, "I'm sorry, but I am 99% confident the remaining tests will be negative and your diagnosis will be ALS." We were told ALS is terminal. There is no cure, there is no management, and the average life expectancy was 2 to 5 years. Tom was told to go home, get his affairs in order, and to do all those things that he wanted to do, his bucket list, sooner rather than later. We had no hope for a treatment, a drug, or a cure. In the absence of no hope to beat this disease, what you do hope for is a slow progression. You hope and you pray you beat that 2 to 5 year life expectancy, and that the years you do get, they're going to be good years. For us, just 3 years into Tom's diagnosis, his disease progression had gotten to the point where he would either need a trach and be ventilator dependent, or he would have to go home in hospice because he was experiencing respiratory failure. He chose to trach, and for the remainder of his life, we cared for him in our home. In those last 3 years of his life, he was paralyzed, he was trached, he was on a ventilator, he had a feeding tube for nutrition and medication. He couldn't speak in his own natural voice, so he used eye gaze technology to talk for him. Many of you are probably thinking, man, I couldn't live like that. But what you're not considering is how love will give you strength you never knew you had. And Tom loved his family, and he stayed with us until the disease had taken everything from him. From the beginning of his diagnosis, we took a very proactive approach to ensuring the end-of-life issues were prepared as much as we could. His will, his medical directive, his power of attorney, the medical power of attorney, they were all in place within that first year of diagnosis. Tom was also forced to retire early from his position at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, but he structured his retirement to care for me and our son after his death. He did everything he could to ensure that when he passed, his family would be taken care of. And I did what I could to ensure that when he passed, I could grieve my husband and not have to deal with the burden of life that would be after Tom. While I'm grateful for the steps that we took, the transition from caregiver to survivor has been an even greater challenge than just the caregiving. And that's only because while caregiving, Tom and I had each other to face the hard stuff. But as a survivor, I faced the hard stuff alone. One of the things I wanted to do with this wonderful opportunity of speaking to all of y'all today is to share my thoughts on what resources worked and the ones that I could have used. And keep in mind, I did a lot of pre-planning. I have a little bit of control issues. So we did have hospice. We had hospice come into the home a year before he passed, and they helped tremendously. But understanding the difference between having hospice come in your home, using private insurance or Medicare, is a very different thing than using VA contracted hospice. For example, with the VA contracted hospice, hospice is considered a concurrent care. And this means that you do not lose any services, like specialized medication. You don't lose your home-based primary care team. You don't lose your physical therapy. VA contracted hospice is an additive service, which is very different than the other models of hospice found with Medicare and private insurance. I quickly learned that difference, and that helped me to ensure Tom was able to continue to receive all the support services he needed from the VA for a good quality of life as he neared the end of his journey. While watching last year's convening, I was introduced to the idea of a death doula. It was something I looked into, but it was something I wasn't able to connect with anyone to help us. So I did research. And that research helped our family when it was time to remove Tom from life support. We were able to go into the process with our eyes open and make the transition as peaceful and as calm as we could for Tom. And that preparation allowed us to be in the moment as we said our final goodbyes. I can say I don't have any lingering what-ifs regarding that transition. It was all done according to his wishes, which allowed my son and I to be with Tom as his family and not as his caregivers as he passed. The words I repeated to my husband as he was removed from the life support, was that he was loved, that he was safe, and that he was saved. So some of the things that helped me. We were part of the home-based primary care program, and our home-based primary care therapist was able to successfully argue with her supervisor that the program allows the VA to follow patients and families for up to 30 days following the discharge. Because of this, the week following Tom's death, the therapist that had been with our family for several years came to my home and provided me with the much-needed mental health assistance. This allowed me the time I needed to get back with my own therapist, whom I had not seen in years. And in meeting with someone that I was familiar with, like the therapist that had been coming into our home over the last several years, that allowed me to start the process and processing the emotional toll that not only caregiving took, but the devastation of losing my husband of 32 years. Another thing was that Tom was enrolled in the VDC program. That's the Veteran-Directed Care Program. What would have been great for me would be that if we were able to access some remaining hours of our VDC program with the caregivers, the non-skilled caregivers that helped me with Tom, if they could have come in and helped me go through the mountains of medical supplies. I was lost. it was hard looking at those medical supplies. And so having someone coming into the home would have been very helpful to help with that transition of moving his stuff out. I was overwhelmed and I didn't know what to do. Also, and I told you I was a little bit of a control freak, I'm still shocked I didn't think about this. But before Tom, his journey became to the point where he was bedridden, we had our house remodeled using the wonderful VA grants. And we had our house, it was able to accommodate his disability. But after Tom died, I was left with a home that's fully accessible, and it was perfect for an ALS veteran. But it was a constant reminder that my husband was no longer with me. In all of the financial planning I did not consider the cost of taking the home from a fully handicap accessible one to one that is more like the home pre-ALS. Had I been able to utilize remaining funds in the housing grant, that would have helped me get that house back together. I have to say that I am so excited that the conversation from caregiver to survivor is gaining traction. From tough conversations, we can see the needs of this community. We can identify the resources, and I truly believe there is a solution to every problem. And we can begin to find ways to support caregivers to survivors like me. Thank you very much for listening to my story. Thank you. That was really hard.
Laura, you are unbelievable, and such an advocate for Tom and your fellow caregivers, particularly those who are caring for someone with ALS. I am gonna not stand long in between you all and lunch. I'm hungry, I'm sure you're all hungry. It's been an incredible first half to the day, and a huge day for our community. We unveiled 2 new resources, a new caregiver mental wellness framework, and a new joint report on caregiver to survivors. We had a record number of commitments made by our partners that I want to take 1 minute to recognize. Deloitte pledged to digitize our new caregiver mental wellness framework so that it can be accessed by any caregiver wherever they are, whenever they need it. Booz Allen Hamilton pledged to work with us to create a new assessment tool that Hidden Heroes can use to better understand their current state of mental wellness and better navigate the existing tools and resources. And the USAA Educational Foundation pledged to work with us to create a new military life financial training platform tailored to the unique needs of the caregiving community that will be completely free of cost. We also learned about countless investments and enhancement that the VA will be making in caregiver support. And we heard from VA leaders attesting to their commitment, and you heard some deadlines from Dr. Alnahal. We'll be holding them accountable to each and every person in this room. I'd like to thank again Senator Dole. I'd also like to thank the incredible EDF staff who work behind the scenes every single day. You all stand up. Stand up, Gia. Everybody who works with Senator Dole and me every day, they are passionate about this work. And we thank them for what they do every single day. And to every single person who's in this room, and to the record crowd that we had watching online, a huge amount of people all across this country watching us through the streaming portal and in VA waiting rooms and clinical waiting rooms all across the country. We've been on TV all day. We really, really appreciate it. Now, go have your lunch. And we're going to be back here at starting at 2 o'clock for the second half of the day and our focus on our hidden helpers. Thanks for all being here. Oh. And some folks is this working? Do pictures? We gotta do some pictures, right? Let's do Dave. Dave.